Around the pond, we often see coot and moorhen. These are two birds which are quite dark in colour, but it's quite easy to tell them apart. The coot has got a white beak and a white shield on the front of its face, and the moorhen has got a red beak, and the red goes up the front of its face also. These two birds, while they live in the water, they don't have webbed feet. They've got flaps of skin on their toes to help them swim through the water, but their toes are not joined up like the toes of the mallard. When these birds are swimming, they have to try a little bit harder, so quite often you see them nodding their head as they swim. Every time they move one leg or the other leg, they sort of nod their head. The coot is a diving bird, and it will dive down under the water and feed on water plants and some of the aquatic insects also. Moorhens are very secretive birds, and they'll spend a lot of time hiding in the tall reeds and the vegetation at the edge of the pond.
So one of the birds that we might see on the pond is the Mute Swan, and it is a beautiful big bird with a long neck and an orange beak, and they have a little black sort of ball at the front of their head, and this is a little bit bigger in the males than the females. And you might see them on the pond or the loch sticking their bums up in the air, and this is them looking for food underneath the water. They are vegetarians and they eat some of the plants that we find in the pond. When we go out bird watching, we bring our binoculars, and this helps us to see the birds that are a little bit further away. When we're using them, we must be careful not to look directly up at the sun, and don't walk while you're looking into your binoculars. And always remember, just keep them around your neck when you're using them.
When we were outside, we were able to see some of the birds that live on the water. We saw the mallard duck with its webbed feet for swimming, and we saw the mute swan as well. Inside we've got a few other birds that you see around Loch Ness and sometimes around the pond at the Loch Ness Discovery Centre. The birds we have in front of us are all part of our taxidermy collection. These are birds that had died, and a person called a taxidermist was able to preserve their skin. So we have them here with all their original feathers and colours, so that we can get a close-up look at them and all of their different plumage. This is a good opportunity to look at the differences in their beaks and their feet, and how they're adapted to the different places where they live and the foods that they eat. The first bird that I'm going to talk about is this one here. This is the grey heron, and it is seen very, very often around the edge of Loch Ness, and it's quite a tall bird. We often see it standing amongst the tall vegetation, waiting to catch its prey. It's got long legs. This is quite a small one. This is a young bird, so it's not that big. They are a bit bigger than this in real life. And they stand tall amongst the vegetation at the edge of the loch, waiting for fish or small ducklings or frogs to pass by, and then they'll catch them with their strong and pointed beak. Another bird that we find around the pond from time to time is this little bird here. Even though it's a very tiny bird, it's got a very big name. This one is called the Kingfisher. Whenever you do see a kingfisher, you'll see a bird moving very, very quickly across in front of you. But you will know what it is, because there's only one bird in this country that has got this brilliant blue colour on its plumage. A very small bird, but again, it eats fish. And if we compare it with the grey heron, we can see it's got the same shape of beak. The kingfisher will perch on a small branch and watch the water, looking for little fish. Then it will dive down into the water, grab those little sticklebacks and be back up again, all in less than 2 seconds. Very, very fast and agile wee bird. If you look at its feet, even though it lives near water, it's got very small claw-like feet for perching on the stems of the plants. When we were using our binoculars, we could look out onto Loch Ness and we were able to see many, many ducks out on the water. As the winter progresses, we'll see more and more of these birds here. These are tufted duck, and these are a bird that migrates to Lough Neagh during the winter months. These birds make their nests in countries that we would consider much, much colder than here, places like Iceland, and in the winter time those countries get too cold. So the birds migrate southwards to find places where there is open water which remains ice-free for the whole of the year. These birds, they live out on the water and they're well adapted for that habitat. They've got webbed feet, you can see them nice and clearly here, and they've got lovely soft feathers which again keep them warm and keep them waterproof. This is the male tufted duck here on this side, and you can see it's got a little tufty bit on the back of its head, and the female, just like the mallard, is less brightly coloured. This one is mostly brown in colour, dark brown and light brown with a little tiny patch of white. And the reason why female birds are like that, in the bird world, it's the female birds that have to sit on the nest and look after the young ducklings. So it helps if they've got less bright colouring, and it keeps them better camouflaged. These tufted ducks are they're diving birds, and they will dive down to the bottom of the loch to feed on little creatures like the pond snails. For these birds, their legs are further back in their bodies than the mallard duck, and that's to help them whenever they're underneath the water. When they're diving underneath the water, their little legs go out behind them and they act like a little propeller just like a propeller would at the back of a boat. They've got curved beaks, which is good for handling the wee insects, and it also helps when they're trying to scoop up their food from the water. But just think of it like eating soup. You wouldn't use your knife and fork to eat soup, you're going to use a spoon. So the spoon-shaped beaks that these birds have do help them whenever they're feeding in the water.